It's good to meet you, man.
Likewise.
Marlena had reached out to me saying, first of all, how do you know Marlena? That's a common question on the podcast. It's almost cliche now. How do you know Marlena?
I know her from a couple different when she worked for a time at the National Hispanic Institute, helping out with kind of just doing some research, looking at our kind of history of curriculums and looking at patterns. And so I got to know her when I think she lived in San Marcos, Texas for a while. And then when I moved to New York City for a time, we just reconnected. And I think she was at SAG and I was at another nonprofit. And so we would actually just meet up for lunch and coffee. And my final years in New York, I started with some other folks, a charter school, and she was at the board. It was a very short-lived project, but also I involved her in that. And then we've just stayed in touch over the years, and she sent us a couple cases of water. Just kind of, I think knowing what are some of the immediates. So that's how we've known each other. And we've just remained in touch and through all these different journeys in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think Marlena would know what somebody in your position or what Texas was going through because her family her mom lived through the aftermath of the hurricanes and the earthquakes in Puerto Rico. Where her mom, I went down there, stayed with her mom, and they didn't have they didn't have electricity. They didn't have, it was basically whatever you can think of. So I'm sure when she heard about what was going on with you, she was like, when you've been there, when you've been through that, you're like, okay, I know what they need. Water. I know what they need. First of all, let me just check something real quick, and then I want to hear this story. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have this recorded. Sometimes, with technology and everything.
Right.
So from what I've read, I'm not from Texas, but from what I've read, shout out to Arturo Dominguez, wrote a really good piece for Latino Rebels. You guys have, starting in 2000, you guys deregulated your energy market, and that was, just like free marketers always say, that's going to be better. When companies compete, you win, right? But it doesn't seem to work out that way. So, I mean, run us through. It started Monday night, right, when everybody's asleep.
Excuse me. I kind of want to almost feel like it was Sunday night.
Yeah.
But right around Monday, se puso seria, la cosa se puso seria. And I'm originally from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to school in Boston. So snow and weather, it's kind of normal. And you're used to certain things if you grew up in these spaces. And I've lived in Texas. I was thinking about it right before, just around 15 years. There has been snow, there has been sleet, there's ice, there's accidents. You got to be careful.
Right.
This was something totally, totally different. In that, just in just a second, your basic infrastructure of everything is gone. In our situation, we lost gas, which was the heating, and that was the first. Oh, so that's what for us it was first, the gas. So some of the people didn't have gas or they have electric heating, so they were fine.
Well, how do you know your gas is out? I mean, the heating doesn't work,
because
right?
The heating system doesn't work, and your cooking system doesn't work, right? Your oven range, if you're gas based. So in our situation, our little house, you're like, okay, well, all right, well, we got the grill and there's a lot of snow, so we'll figure it out. We have electricity, and then the electricity's gone. And then right after that, the last one, water.
And you're thinking like when do you realize that it's, I mean, and the other thing is that Texas had like 2 weeks notice, right? You guys knew that this winter storm was coming, right?
Yeah. And I'll be honest, but you get that all the time. And there's, you do have to be careful with freezes. Freezes happen. People forget to do the drip thing. And, I work at a ranch in rural Texas, and it happens. The pipes break, or if there was a drought in the summer, right? Because global warming is a thing. There's drought in the summer, and then it freezes. Now you have the earth is just moving these pipes around. They break. So people kind of are ready for that, but they're not ready for all of your infrastructure to go out, and maybe more than a day. You're talking about a week. People went 6 weeks. I mean, the schools, they're already behind. They're already having challenges, and now they got to shut down another week. And so you just start asking yourself, like, you go into immediate survival mode. You started charging your device in the car. All right, I got a car. And those are the moments that, like Marlene, I have family in Puerto Rico. And immediately, like, I start having these like flashes of stories I heard from my uncle and my cousins and my grandma, like, oh my God, abuelita in her final days, no TV. And that's kind of her routine. Get up, clean, TV, go to, and now she's just sitting in my uncle's couch. And he had 2 generators stolen. And now you start hearing about people and generators in the homes, or people who had generators, but they're frozen under snow. Yeah. So they didn't get them out till the 3rd day. So all these pseudo plans just fall apart. I was lucky. I listened to my wife. Friday night, she's like, babe, why don't you stop at the grocery store and like load up? Because, the grocery store, I think for her, it was more people are going to freak out and therefore it's just going to be a mess.
And were you thinking like, oh, it's like when COVID hit, the same thing. My wife's like, oh, you should go load up. And I'm like, oh, relax.
Yeah. And I'm like, on the way home, I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. Let's do it. All right. I stop at the HEB and I'm like, all right, load up on 2 of this, 2, and I load up the pantry. But again, I load up the pantry and I get a lot of fresh stuff because I don't think my fridge is going to go out.
Right.
Or I don't think I'm going to not have water now.
We're just not, we are so civilized, I guess you can say, that we don't know, we have no idea what we would do without power, without plumbing, we think we know, right? But when shit hits the fan.
Yeah. And so I think for us, the final one was, it got to like Tuesday now. We had done a cold Sunday night. Then we did Monday night. And then by Tuesday, we got down to a quarter tank. My car, it was empty. And then my wife's car, we had it at a quarter tank. And at that point, I'm like, our communication, our phone, like anything we're charged, that's it. We got a couple hours left. And if this goes on till Friday and we're still stuck here, like.
So wait, when did you say the gas went out? Did you say, was that Sunday night?
So for us, in my neighborhood, the gas went out Sunday. And a lot of what happened
in your
there,
neighborhood, is that because you're on the outskirts of Austin? Why is that?
I think in my case, we're in the outskirts of Austin. Like I live in Austin, but not city of Austin. Mm-hmm. So the gas situation affects us because we're on a heating gas. We ended up leaving my brother, who lived in a part of the grid that's right on the hospital, major distribution.
Right.
He was fortunate that he never, ever lost power. He lost water pressure, but his heating system was water-based, so he was fine. That was toasty, but we were in a small 1-1, me, my wife, my daughter, him and his wife, and we were just all snug there. It was kind of like Christmas. But the other thing about it is subconsciously, though, at the same time, you're like, you also are recognizing that in that action, you took another risk because of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's getting tested on the way to like you're fleeing and
right.
And so that is like a quiet situation that I think people haven't even really talked about. Is like the massive COVID risk that was taken in order to get yourself out of another life-threatening situation. But we got panicked. We came back by Friday. We were back, and a lot of it there was you start hearing on these HOA apps because now there's like apps for everything, and like, did you let your water drip? Did you turn off the water heater? Because if it comes on and it's empty, you could burn your house down or something like that. Or, hey, pipes could break several days into this process. Check your wall and drywall for spots. And all of a sudden, my wife and I can't sleep because we're panicked we just got this little house, right? The American dream. And we could go back and it could be in ashes.
Yeah.
And the problem with
it's
driving,
crazy. Like you said, like this would have been a catastrophe without COVID, right? You're talking about floods. There's floods, right? And they're saying is Texas still under ice as we speak, or has it thawed? It's beginning to thaw.
Oh, it was in the 70s. Yes, 2 days ago. I mean, that was the other nuts thing, right? Then you get to week 2, the week after, and everybody's kind of back to normal. Kids
in
are
their
back
shorts,
to school,
flip-flops.
Yeah, and then you're like, wow, we could almost quickly forget it all, which is what I imagine policy powers want. Quickly forget about it, start cracking jokes at national conventions about it.
Right.
because everybody's back to normal. But the reality is there's a lot of people not back to normal. The shelves are still empty. Yesterday's shelves are still empty. Shipping is disrupted. And, you know, it was also difficult to think of the fact that as crazy as it was, all the middle class amenities that were gone. Imagine for the people who never had those, of course, right? In the process. So just like COVID, the poor, you know, the needy, people without means, the people who live on a cash basis.
Right.
You know, I know that for my neighbor, this was a week of lost revenue for him.
And you were saying how you teach a class of high schoolers taking college credit at Austin Community College. And you guys had been back to school in class sessions in Texas for how long?
This week, Wednesday, the colleges and universities opened back up. But you're talking, so for my kids, that was the equivalent of 3. We do two a week. They lost 3 sessions. So that's about 10% of the course is gone. UT, and then the high schoolers, which I work with high school youth. I mean, the schools are already severely challenged because of COVID.
Yeah, I read something they lost on average, the kids in school right now in the last year have lost like a third of math and like half of their reading. You know, it's just a lost year of education.
Yeah. Well, and then the frustrating part is when you start, I think of course, there's some upsides or there's growth. And the growth is that I do believe that the electorate is about to get really informed about energy.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the other issue is that what also breaks down is the water. And that already is a crisis in Texas. Like there's already water shortage issues. So now you have water and energy, this massive state. And a lot of the things that could have prevented this, the plans are there. The proposals are there. The money's there.
Well, let's talk about some of that. I mean, the craziest thing that I saw was, you know, for an outsider, you're reading about there's a boil water order for millions of Texans. You know, this is 2021, and you're not only boiling water from the faucet, boiling snow to drink. You know, in Texas, right? Texas is supposed to be independent, right? And standing on its own 2 feet, and it could easily be its own country. We're hearing, right? And before this happened, everybody from California is fleeing California. Everybody's fleeing and going to Texas, talking about how Texas, especially Austin, is like a paradise now. It's a boom town, and then this happens. So, like, walk us through this ERCOT, right? Which has the greatest ironic name ever, Electric Reliability Council. Reliability, right? And they oversee the free market of like if you're from Chicago, you have ComEd. That's your electric company. There might be another one, but nobody really uses it. It's ComEd. I think the other one's like there's a gas. You know, you have a gas company, just one gas company. But you have this ERCOT in Texas. They supply 90% of the state. Half of the board members are not from Texas. One guy's from Canada. So, I mean, what is this? What is this ERCOT? How does electricity work in Texas?
I think that's the big question that everybody's starting to unpack. I mean, one quick to something you were starting to say, it's like my neighbor comes to me and he says, "Hey, you have solar panels. Why are you out of power?" And I ask myself, like, yeah, why am I out of power? Yeah. Oh, right, because in order to get the solar deal and the rebate from the city and the state, basically I give my power to the city so that they can feed it back to me, and then I get financing and I get all these great, deals. So the thing is, everybody is trapped in the deal, in the Texas deal. Yo, no state income taxes. Yo, cost of living, avocados, 33 cents. Like tacos everywhere, burgers everywhere, barbecue everywhere. All the cool DJs are moving here too. So, hey, everything's awesome. There's Puerto Rican trucks and Cuban trucks, and you can get Dominican bread and cakes. You can get it all now. And so, and Tesla's here now. Oh my God, my property value went up. So you're enamored in the deal and in your day-to-day. So in a way, I think that there's this not relief, but this big aha of, we never stop to ask any of those questions.
Yeah.
You just assume, and if you're a transplant, you kind of just assume that it works the way it does everywhere, but do you even know how that works? So now you start to realize, wait, we don't even control, like the state really, like the people don't even live here.
Yeah.
Wait, we don't. And then there are other things that we could have done, but nobody did them. And we could just winterize these things, knowing that if you do the stats, it's getting colder, there's more snow. I mean, even snow happening twice when you had 3 years ago none, like, well, the percentage increase is massive.
Texas is it's demonstrating that the private sector isn't always a solution, especially for public needs, right? Because I was reading that they didn't winterize, they haven't done the maintenance because they're competing. It's private sector. They have to compete, and there's no money. They're not going to invest in winterizing. They don't get any money from that, so they didn't prepare.
And it's like Puerto Rico, they could have started fixing the grid. People have been saying like that, they just didn't do it. I think about I forget the name of the ship, but the memory that also kept hitting me, like, were all the stories of the big leak, the BP leak in what was it, in the Gulf
under
and
Obama.
That it totally could have been prevented. They just didn't.
Yeah.
And nobody asked questions because everybody's like, hey, I just got cool solar and my food is cheap and like everything's great.
I think there was even talk at the time that it was cheaper for them to just let the leak happen than to fix it. If everything's to the whim of the dollar, right? Of price, like, because everything got solved really in Texas when the government came in and said, "Hey, ERCOT, raise your prices." So regulation actually saved it, right? And I just read that you guys could have had blackouts for months, maybe. It was
like minutes away from like being crippled the way that in Maria.
Yeah.
For
6 months.
Exactly. And that the state was at a verge there. And then you hear leaders, so-called political leaders, that we should sacrifice ourselves for the good of not being regulated by the federal government, that freedom should live. And so we should just eat it. I mean,
isn't that what your governor was saying under COVID, right? Let old people take the hit, take the bullet. Yeah. And so they were saying the same thing again for this whole winter thing, like, or what?
Rick Perry said that we should do a sacrifice, that regulation is the no-go, that we should just, eat it. There were some local town officials of, suck it up, be tough. We're tough, Oh, okay. So I'll start burning my fence for wood and fire in a little HOA condo neighborhood. Yeah. I'll be tough. And I could have been, and some people did, but also,
but then you have Ted Cruz going to Cancun.
Yeah.
I mean, what are people talking about Ted Cruz? I mean, I think his political career's over. I mean, it's just an embarrassment, but you never know with these kinds of characters. I mean, first of all, he's not even he's from Canada, right? And he's not even that popular. I saw Beto's running. I think that's whatever. What do Texans think of Beto?
I think there's a lot of buyers. I think there's a lot of people looking back of like, oh man, I really should have voted, or man, why didn't I not think about the primary, or why didn't I register? Like, I think there's a lot of people that, God, that it would have been a very different scenario to have had a senator that
in the state at the time
would have that the moment this is happening would have been all over it, the way that as a private citizen he's being all over it.
Yeah.
So I think there's one. I don't know that means that everybody's sold on Beto. I do think that there is that kind of hindsight that it would have been better to have this guy around right now. I think that as much as there's a person who hates Ted Cruz, that there can even be a Latino who hates and cannot stand Ted Cruz. You'll find another one that is a loyal supporter and gets it. And gets that this is a game, this is politics, and it's rhetoric, and it's about actions and policy. And there is a strong evangelical movement behind him. I mean, the guy, didn't he announce his nomination for president at Liberty University, like in the headquarters of like the Falwell Ministries. I mean, and we know, I mean, we could have the whole national conversation about the influence of that community within the country. And so those numbers are still there.
I mean, you could, yeah, in American politics, you can get away with anything if you say you're a God-fearing person, right? And you have a Bible and, like the evangelicals elected Trump, probably the least Christian president we've ever had, just by how he acts, right? But
I do think if I was just listening this morning to I can't even remember what podcast it was, but the conversation about Texas. Is it Georgia, right? Is it the next Georgia? Or is it really the next California? Or is it really just decades away? It comes down to what all these things have been, including Georgia. Who's going to show up and vote?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of communities that are still not engaged, disenfranchised, or disillusioned. And I do agree that part of the conversation was that, at least in this state, the Latino community, which is a growing, large, huge voter base, I think this is ground zero for showing how complex it is. I don't think Miami and LA or New York. I think Texas shows you the huge range.
As an outsider,
political spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah. When I, as an outsider, when I saw that, the border states, a lot of Latinos in the border counties went for Trump. He's talking directly to them, right? He's all this anti-immigrant rhetoric, and they really pick up on it. They really like it. So, yeah, I mean, Latinos are not like black people, right? They're not like white, and they're more like white people than black people, right? Meaning that there's no loyalty between Latinos like that, right? They're more personal, they're more conservative, right? I mean, I think Latino a lot of culture has a conservative vein in it.
It does, absolutely. I also think, though, that it's also this, because the American narrative Latinos have been so absent from it, intentionally and unintentionally, that I'm just going to worry about the practical things that apply to politics apply to me. Right. So if you're a small business owner, the last thing you're going to want is more taxes, because you're barely trying to grow your second restaurant, your second this. So it's not, they believe that you can almost, I think that there's a growing base of people that you could throw mud on everybody. You could point that there's terrible in all parties. What are you doing for me now?
Right.
And what are you doing for how I sustain myself? And then there is also where you see evangelicals and Catholics and other Christian groups, on issues like pro-life, they're unmoved, Not that they're, everybody's a single issue voter, but there are single issue voters,
right?
And so it's,
but it's just the whole vibe of the Republican Party fits more with the Latino culture, right? Work hard, don't expect anything from anybody. Love God, love your family. I mean, that's the Republican Party platform, and it's also like a major part of Latino culture.
And here too, again, here's where you see, though, a Latino that is a 6-7 generation Tejano, that's family hasn't moved in over 100 years, and it's been these lines and political situations that have transferred control.
Right.
And then you have folks that just got here maybe like 10 minutes ago, and then everything in between. I'm really involved with the Puerto Rican community here in Austin, which is growing really quickly after the crisis and then after Maria. And there's a lot of military bases, which is the way a lot of Puerto Ricans migrate around the country, right? You go to Houston, you go to Katy, they call Katy Suela. And there's a lot of professionals from the energy industry that are on those. So also, if you're in the energy industry, are you politically going to be inclined to just vote against it all the time? Like Democrats in Pennsylvania who work in fracking. They're Democrats, but they work in fracking. Are they going to vote against their personal interests? So I think a lot of the politics of the country right now is people are voting to put their own personal interests, and sometimes that's going to take priority over the cultural issues.
Talk about the Puerto Rican presence in Austin. That interests me, because we always think of Texas as Mexican, right? But obviously you're Puerto Rican, and you're saying there's a lot of Puerto Ricans in Austin. I mean, what's the vibe like that? What's the vibe there? Because there's not a lot of Puerto Ricans in Vegas. I mean, I see bumper stickers, but I mean, we have like 2 restaurants.
I think at least when I came to Austin, I did what I think what a lot of people did, and I Googled Puerto Rico, Austin. I found one restaurant, and I found a cultural organization. Like I'm sure a lot of young Latinos did some folklorico as a kid and in college, and so there was a group, and I was kind of very suspect, like Puerto Ricans in Austin doing folkloric bomba. Come on,
exactly,
really? But immediately what I learned is, so you have a sector, IBM, the tech companies. There is a Puerto Rican engineering technical community that was attracted here, especially as Dell starts growing and Apple. So if you're a Latino in tech, and the thing about Puerto Ricans, just like teachers, they're bilingual for most cases. So they have American degrees and they're citizens. So they're an asset to a lot of companies. So there was a professional class. There was a lot of Puerto Ricans of different generations that are attached to migration through the base system. And whether it was Fort Bliss in El Paso, Fort Hood, or all the different ones in San Antonio, which is, again, in San Antonio, a lot of the Puerto Ricans through the bases. You come, you do your service, weather's nice, you can get to the beach in a couple hours. Again, no taxes, cost of living, and a lot of people just stay.
Yeah.
So in the northern parts of Austin towards Killeen, which is where the base is, there's a very large Puerto Rican community. And then that extends into like Round Rock, North Austin, where you have a lot of those, the Dell folks, your IBM folks, Sun Microsystems. But now what you have is you've had to places like Austin, San Antonio, Houston, a new Puerto Rican community that is fleeing economic crisis and the hurricane crisis. And you saw all of a sudden at the Puerto Rican Center, you were seeing every weekend a new family, a new family, a new family, a new family. And they were like, oh, we left here, or we had to flee, or we came to my brother-in-law's, or, my cousins in Killeen, so we moved here. And at the same time, you see very recent too, a lot of Puerto Ricans from big cities, just like you were talking about, a lot of people are moving to Austin.
Right.
Well, there come your Puerto Rican teachers leaving New York, or there come your Puerto Rican Chicagoans who want to come work in investments in Austin as opposed to Chicago.
Yeah.
So it's kind of all happening at the same time. And you see it, I think, with a lot of different Latino cultures. So Austin, San Antonio, all the cities are becoming very, very mixed and diverse from a Latino context. And then let alone just Mexico, all the versions of Mexico that you find, right? People from Monterrey, people from Juarez, people from Guadalajara, people from Oaxaca, and even just within Mexico, you see, which in some parts of Texas, you wouldn't have even seen that. You wouldn't have seen as much even Mexican diversity as you're seeing now in a lot of the cities. So that, I think, on a cultural level, now I think the issue is, can now you, as a Latino community, a Puerto Rican community, start to have political influence?
Right.
And not necessarily running for office, but actually influencing the social fabric of the communities that you're now inhabiting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I'm getting kind of like a FOMO of not being in Texas or not living in Texas, because at least for the last 20 years, especially among Latinos, but among everybody. But, I was back in Chicago. I moved to Vegas in 2016. And in Chicago, the word on the street for like 15 years was Texas, 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 man. You can get a big ass house there for like $150,000, whatever. And, just I knew a lot of Latinos, trickling, but now it's like, Texas is booming, and I think it's still going to be booming. And this kind of this crisis, again, like with the pandemic, it's a crisis, it's terrible, but there's opportunities to like become better afterward, right? And a lot of people are doing that personally, and we're doing that as a country. I think Texas is going to take this and be like, we're booming. We're going to be this great state. But we got to figure out, how we supply power, how we supply water, and how we organize ourselves. Because you guys are going from a Republican free state. Now you're going to a more progressive future state, right?
Yeah, I think it's also just, and just inform. I think everyone's just going to be, everybody's going to wise up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I think the way that everybody's wised up about health,
exactly.
and about, even beyond COVID, of just like all the diseases that we've been transmitting to each other, and all that, you watch stuff on TV, and now from a couple months ago or a year ago, and you're like, man, that's a lot of germs being spread there.
Yeah.
Maybe
you see all those old concerts and shit like that. You're like, that's a lot of people.
Yeah,
man, they're touching.
Like, oh, the dude didn't wash his hands. Like, and you're so hyper aware. And I think those things are going to keep us healthy and how we come back to it. So I think the same thing with, like I said, I don't feel duped. I don't feel it was a scam. Maybe it is, but I'm like, okay, I got a solar in my house. I got these but now I'm like, what did I actually sign up for?
Right.
And what are the details? And now that's still lingering question from my neighbor. If my power is coming from the sun, how could it have gone out?
Yeah.
So and then if I'm not paying the city for my energy and the city went out, then why did I go out? And again, I didn't really ask. And like most people probably are asking, or, man, this gas situation, why am I on gas? Or isn't gas bad? Wait, why do I have it in my house? And all of a sudden, all these different things, you're starting to ask yourself. The water, great. But now my wife and I were talking about yesterday, like, look at all this plastic that we just consumed in order to consume water, right? Because now we have to do, so it's just so complex, but I think that everybody, is going to start treating it that way a lot more. And I do think that will affect how people vote and how people just operate. Hopefully a lot of more good comes out of it, but I still just believe that there is a hope that everyone will forget.
Yeah.
And that we can continue to turn the dollar the way it's turning, cause no disruption, and hope that next winter it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I mean,
it's in the process, everyone will get more salt and water to load up, so that everybody complains less next time.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, the people in the powers that be are hoping that everybody forgets. But in an emergency, in a crisis, when shit hits the fan, that's when you find out the systems, the processes you had in place, do they work or not, right? When the hurricanes and the earthquake hit Puerto Rico, that's when Puerto Ricans are like, you know what, this status is not working. The only reason we have this status is because if shit hits the fan, we're attached to the strongest, most richest, most powerful, most capable country in the world. So we'll be all right. And then when that didn't happen, you're like, okay, this doesn't work. And then in the pandemic, how does our healthcare system work? How everything fell apart in some places, and some other places took it really well, right? But things fell apart. And in Texas, right, there's a winter storm. Things fall apart, and people start asking, okay, we're so used to our modern society, not used to thinking about these basic things, right? And we leave it to the powers that be to run it and to organize it for us. That now, there's like a grassroots movement across the country of everybody saying, if shit hits the fan, how do I get my water? How does my water work? How does my electricity work? Who runs that? And that's great, man, isn't it? I mean,
I know.
It sucks that it takes a crisis to do that, but it's great.
It does. And even things like like you said about water, like how would I have turned my water? And we're super grateful, blessed, fortunate, privileged that we live in a little neighborhood that people were going around and turning each other's water for each other, and there was this trust. And I had flashbacks of living in the Pennsylvania suburbs as a kid, and of this idealized America of everybody helps everybody. I hope it lasts, because I think that's the kind of communities we want to live in. But it could have been a blip. But I know other people that wasn't the case, and some people got stuck. Some people died. Some people I know are still in crises because the pipes did break. And things that break. As you were talking, I started thinking again. We're talking about these policies. I think, at least in the circles I operate, not so much the Ted Cruz Cancun trip, but the corn in silence was also, I think, more telling. Is that nothing? It was just they almost as if he allowed Cruz to absorb all the like energy, but at the same time, it's like you have two senators. What was the other guy?
Yeah.
Still, where is he?
Yeah.
And so you start like, so then, again, the Beto question, and you just as a voter, you're like, wait, so we have one guy who bails and then another guy who went quiet. And they're on the energy payroll, but who cares? It's crisis.
Well,
Ted
Cruz's
can't
wife.
find some.
Ted Cruz's wife is on the board of what is it? Bear Stearns or something like that, where they have a controlling interest in the energy sector in Texas. So it just doesn't look good at all, right? I mean,
not even some.
And then AOC raises $1 million in 24 hours while he's in Cancun. It just does not look good for him. And I'd be surprised if they vote him back in, but crazier things have happened.
Well, I guess when he go on record a day or two ago that he liked Orlando. Orlando's pretty nice, but not as nice as Cancun. So he's already joking about it at CPAC this week. And I know I can't forget. I know we're on a very cannot let that forget. It's going to be a couple years, right, coming. But and not that even any of the candidates who ran right now would have necessarily have been better, or that they're going to have a second shot. We'll see what's going to happen. But this what occurred. Everybody's look. How did your school board respond? How did your mayor respond? How did your energy provider respond? How did what kind of press releases were you getting in your emails? Were they very legally? Were they sincere? I mean, you're looking at everything. Did your HOA respond?
Yeah,
I know ours. They never left. They decided to stay. They found water. They had people volunteer in trucks to go and like scavenge food for people. And you're paying these HOA dues, you're signing these covenants. So, I mean, you're talking about everything from the most basic level to the federal officers. Everybody is taking a look at how did everybody act? How did everybody behave?
Our HOA sucks, man. We pay the monthly fee, and they don't tell us shit. They only tell us what not to do, what we can't do with our house, what we can't do, But when we need them, they're silent, right? It's just a power trip. I mean, it's just the local leader is this old lady, and she just likes being the queen of the neighborhood.
I hear that, and we feared that. I mean, we're blessed, privileged that that's not the case. But what happened with our gas now is you jogged the memory of what occurred. Our gas company, seeing and forecasting the weather, said, half a tank, third of a tank, they'll be fine. We'll get to them in a couple days, as opposed to being proactive and saying, we should load them up and make sure that they're stocked up in case there's a problem. Oh, and there was a problem. And then there was a leak in one of the gas company's tanks. So that's like a whole straight gas infrastructure issue that got super compounded when the weather and the water and everything happened. The HOA, though, how did ours behave? They were on the phone on those people's ass every minute until they found a way to get through the ice and get through the freaking sleet and load up these things with gas.
Yeah. We're talking about Texas here too, right? It just occurred to me. We're talking about Texas here. You think of oil, Texas tea, oil. You guys have energy. You guys are sitting on all this energy. Told
like, we produce every kind. We produce every solar.
You guys are ahead in wind, right? You guys lead the nation in wind. And not all of them went out.
Yes.
Not all of them went out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Those are the truisms that everybody's like, hold up. I thought we were the bomb on energy.
Yeah.
Hold up. I thought we have all these rainy day funds. Yeah. Aren't we like, can't we just like dip out and just like get some?
Yeah. We're not talking about New Hampshire here. We're talking about Texas. How do they lose power in Texas? And if they can lose power in Texas, it freaks all of us out, right? The whole country out. Because Texas is a big state. It's the biggest state. And if they're losing power and you see these long lines and people boiling snow, and then you're like, holy shit, things are falling apart.
When you start thinking of the doomsday, I mean, like, it's nuts that you're like, wow, I was driving the other day. I'm like, how did this like space I'm in go 50-degree increase in a week? Like, scientifically, that's not, how do you
not
do
right.
that?
It's not right, man.
50 degrees in a week? Like, there's something like, I'm going back to 8th grade earth science, like that, there has to be something wrong. And to your point, I mean, calls I got from friends back home in different parts of the country, I could hear this quiet fear in their voice of like, and they would say that, wait, but don't y'all have like all the energy?
Yeah.
Like almost this quiet fear of like, wait, if they have the drilling and the fracking and the shale and the solar and the wind, and they just ran out. Whoa, what?
Right.
Everybody with this quiet fear of this doom of a whole outage in the country.
No, and it's true.
I think everybody should be scared of that.
And because it's going to happen more and more with climate change, right? I mean, you guys are getting hit with this polar vortex, and
Here's
that's
going to
happen more and more.
You live in Vegas.
Yeah.
And this tripped me out about Vegas. I didn't know that the Strip is its own independent grid.
It's not Vegas. The Strip is not in Vegas proper. The Strip is in a city called Paradise.
Right? And it's got its own, and like everything around it, the city around it has to deal with its own stuff, right? On an energy level. That's the state. The state has decided to be the Vegas Strip of energy, and the country is the rest of the city of Vegas, where all the real people live.
And then if the strip loses power, if the state loses power, it's fucked because it's not connected. That's the other thing, right? Texas couldn't bring in energy from New Mexico, from Oklahoma, from Louisiana, because it's not connected to any other state. It's an island.
And well, just all you're talking about all the bureaucracies in between, or all the levers that did or didn't get pulled to do things like that. Except, right? And then you saw like El Paso, they were on a different grid system.
Yeah, they're not on ERCOT, and they were all right. Right.
And then you go all the way to the eastern part, like towards Beaumont, and a lot of those sectors were okay. And then you think about Houston and that Gulf Coast. That's the other one I couldn't stop thinking, is how many more times does Houston have to get hit? I mean, Katrina, the recent hurricane. I mean, boom, again, the floods. Like this city, which is a huge, huge city, a huge port. I mean, a major like American piece, like foundation of American society. And it just keeps getting hit and hit and hit and hit, crisis after crisis after crisis. I couldn't stop thinking about Houston. And that's just 2 hours away.
And when we're talking about Houston, and we're talking about Dallas, and we're talking about San Antonio, we're talking about the largest Latino population cities in the United States, outside Los Angeles, right? Outside New York. These are the largest, I think that 3 of the top 5 cities with Latino population in the United States are in Texas, or
Harris County, is huge and growing, but man, it's like I was seeing, I call them kids, but people, kids I used to work when they were kids, and following on their social media, and I'm like, God, this guy just rebuilt his house. He literally just rebuilt his house with his parents after the floods, and now they have pipes leaking and they got to fix it again. And that wasn't even like a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And
then of course, you think about those with the least amount of privilege, and it's like, again, it's just again, within situations that are preventable, or can we just wise up and realize that the planet is different, and it's going to require different policies, and we're in a different century. Like, we're legit in a different century. We need to stop operating with 20th century principles and ways of looking at the world. We are not there anymore. Yeah. It's over.
I mean, that's a good place to stop. I want to thank you for coming out. You work for, you're vice president of the National Hispanic Institute.
Mm-hmm.
What work do they do?
It's a nonprofit that works on trying to Latino youth in particular, who see themselves as future leaders, making grades, ambitious, aspirational. We create experiences for these kids to connect, develop their leadership skills, their communication, organizational skills. It's been around 40 years. Wow. And the goal is engaging them in high school, and they play these simulations, they play these leadership games. And in the process of those engagements, they're creating friendships, they're creating networks. And you scroll down 40 years and you now start to see these alumni and these members who are connected, making, influencing our daily lives, but also, I think, approaching their leadership with a different perspective. That's, I think, a little bit more forward-looking, a little bit more wide-ranging, and the different options that they explore. So it's a lot of fun work. It's been, of course, like a lot of things, disrupted in COVID, but we've been pretty proud to be able to go virtual and little by little start integrating our summer experiences back. But that's the day job, that's the work, and I've been there just over 15 years.
I appreciate the work because we definitely need that in the Latino community. You know, we need organizations. We need you know, we're not going to get any outside help, so we gotta take care of our own, lift our own up.
Yep.
So that we
build
can
up
reach
those. We're gonna build that equity up, build the resources, build the talent up from within, and that's very much the ethos of the org. Yeah. Let's not focus all of our energy on you, and we need to do this, change this, and we need to reform that. Let's also pause and also make time to what can we do from within.
Right. Exactly.
You know, let's take stock of the resources. Exactly. How do we mobilize it? How do we integrate it in a smart way and think future?
Because if we're waiting for outsiders, I don't know if you read about what's happening in Imperial Valley with Amazon in California. Imperial Valley, you know, very high Latino population there.
Yeah, absolutely, been there. Mm-hmm.
And there's a high school there where I guess Amazon has like a program at the school where you know the kids, you know, there's Amazon logo and it's all about, they wear like Amazon mock shirts, and it's all about training all these Latino kids to work in an Amazon warehouse. And it's pretty disgusting, right? Because that's what they see us, right? They believe their own lies about us.
Absolutely. I'm watchful. I live now officially an exit from the new Tesla headquarters, manufacturing facility.
Right by the airport, right?
Yeah, between the airport and there. I'm literally one exit. However, and I hear, right? Oh, they're already making major investments into Del Valle ISD, the school district. Cool. I'm curious to see what though.
Right.
Is it STEM so that those kids are set up to be the engineers creating the new solar or alternative, or are these kids being trained so that they can be building the cars?
Right.
We shall see. They open the summer, so we shall see what those investments or how they're going to be used strategically. I hope it's not your example, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, we got to fight for ourselves, right? I mean, we just got to fight for ourselves, and we'll be all right if we fight for ourselves. And then, again, absolutely. I appreciate you and the work you're doing with the National Hispanic Institute. Thank you, man, so much for coming on and sharing the story and giving me the facts. You're the first person I really talked to from Texas. I got my suegro out there. I wanted to hear what was going on, man. I thank you for coming on and sharing, you know, what's the haps in Texas, man. We're still thinking about Texas, and glad to see that it's kind of an awakening, right? There's an awakening happening in Texas politically at a conscious level. And I mean, I think we're all going to, a lot of us are still planning on moving to Texas, man, because it's still, you know, it sounds like it's popping, man.
It kind of is, but just don't.
Right. Yeah. No. When I moved to Vegas, I mean, Vegas is growing so fast, and it changed so much in the last 4 years, you know? And there's this thing in Vegas now, and I've heard about it in Austin, like, don't tell people to move here. Do not tell people to move here. It's going to shit now, but if we can hold on to it just enough, because once you get too many people, there's you know, people are talking about that now. Like, once you get a lot of different people in an area, it's how do you govern that? How do you govern that?
Well,
how do you get everybody on the same page?
It's just you're running out of space, right? Like, everybody's the gentrification thing is real. You know, even us, we haven't even been in this house 3 years, but we're getting in the mail like, please sell your home. Yeah. Or like, hey, we just sold these houses in your neighborhood and we'll sell it for you. You will make and then I'm thinking about my parents who are trying to move here, right, to be close to their grandkids, and I'm like, time is running out, or you're going to be like way far out from the city.
Yeah.
So I fear it looking like Southern California, but I feel like maybe the whole country is just going to look that way. Maybe we're going to have to go to the Dakotas if we want the chill life.
What do you think about, because you're talking about all these talented Puerto Ricans in Texas. What if we are all us talented Puerto Ricans, you know, who have all these skills and experience? Is there an obligation on us to go back to Puerto Rico and lift up the island to reverse the brain drain?
I've thought about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I have cousins. They're younger than me. They're young entrepreneurs. And when Maria happened, I was like, dude, yeah, vénganse, like, get out. You're young, like, we will find you work. There is work here to go around. And they were like, no, we can't because it will come back. And we want to be here when it comes back because we already know that there are going to be investors coming in when it comes back.
For sure.
And they stayed with very intentionally to at least be a presence that would remain when all the outside forces, and that's what you're hearing immediately now, is that everybody's buying it up, getting chopped up. But there's so much opportunity, right? Like, right. I mean, and I was just starting to go. Like, I think I had made like 5 trips in the last 2 years, which was like the most I had made maybe in my first 10 years of life. Right. And I was starting to go. I was starting to start working with schools. I was doing my own trips to the different high schools in Puerto Rico. And then all this COVID stops it. But there is a need for an investment from within. And I know a lot of those young leaders that have come back or are refusing to leave because they're not going to let their island just be taken.
Yeah, when I went down there that November, right after 2 months after the hurricanes hit, and I asked people like, "Why don't are you going to leave?" They looked at me like I was crazy. They were about to fight me, right? Like, I'm not going to leave. This is my home. This is my home, And some of them were born in Philadelphia or something, and and now they were in Puerto Rico, and that Puerto Rico was their home.
So don't move to Austin, to Puerto Rico. You can scoop up a nice spot in Bayamón, Yeah. No, but there's a lot of stuff going on. Like, we were starting to go to this place in Bayamón, El Nido. Props to them. Like, just doing some cool stuff in that city.
Yeah.
And I just think about like, oh man, all these startups that were just getting going. And so people do need to try to go there. Yeah. Keep traveling to Puerto Rico as soon as it's safe, or if it is safe, do it because if we invest back and we invest in those new breweries, those new restaurants, those new shops, that new garb, it can at least slow down some of that imposition that's gonna come.
Yeah, but it's gonna come, right? It's gonna come. I mean, we're headed the way of Hawaii. We're headed the way of Hawaii, right?
Yeah,
if we're lucky.
Was not so good.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
Thank you so much. Let everyone know where they can. Are you on social media? Are you on the socials? Or are you a normal, healthy human being and off that stuff?
No. People can probably JCOTTO 31. J Cotto 31 is, and NHI Julio is the other one. And I kind of keep my work because I work with a lot of kids in schools, and that's pretty focused about my work there. And then J Cotto 31 is my more fun personal take. But you got to keep up with the kids too. So you got to, whatever the platform is, you got to jump to the next one.
Yeah, I'm not jumping to TikTok though, man. I tried and I don't get it. I don't get it. But anyways, man, take it easy. Thank you so much for coming on, man. And
thank you very much.
Touch, man. Peace, bro.
Absolutely.